Okay, hi everyone. So this is your lecture on the EQA, Environmental Quality Act 1974, where we are going to discuss especially on two things. One, licensing of prescribed premises, and the other one is the EIA. So this lecture is on the Environmental Quality Act 1974 again, yeah, whereby we are going to discuss about environmental control in land development activities. Okay, last week we have talked about how in Malaysia we have the environmental management system. So this week we are going to discuss one of the tools being used in the environmental management system in Malaysia, which is the EQA, okay, Environmental Quality Act 1974. So for this week, okay, we are going to discuss EQA, the Environmental Quality Act, okay, especially on two things, yeah. The first one is license or permit for prescribed premises. Okay, we are going to learn about how some buildings or some places, some buildings, some venues may be declared as prescribed premise under EQA. And the use of these prescribed premises require license or permit in order for the premise to be able to be used, to be legally used. The second one is we are going to discuss on the EIA requirement for prescribed activities. So there are two things. One is the prescribed premise, the physical place or physical building, which requires license or permit. The second one is prescribed activities, perbuatan, action, okay, which requires EIA. So to prescribe means in Malaysia, in Malay it's terjadual or berjadual. So prescribed premise is bangunan berjadual, prescribed activities is activity berjadual. Okay. And we are going to discuss, we are also going to talk about EIA for prescribed activities. I'm giving you two case studies. The first one is Bakun Dam Case, Bakun in Sarawak, the empangan Bakun. The second one is case study on bauxite mining in Kuantan. So it happened a few years back, yeah. And this activity was considered as prescribed activity and would require actually EIA. And also we are going to discuss other environmental protection provisions, especially with regard to pollution, different types of pollution. And last week I have mentioned that environmental damage is more than just pollution. So that's what we are going to come again this week. So the first two parts are not just about pollution, kan? Pollution, the prescribed premise and also the EIA is not just about pollution, okay? But more on activities that can damage the environment in general. But also we are going to come back to the main reason why EQA was enacted, which is to protect the environment, okay, via pollution controls. Then, okay, now what is EQA? Environmental Quality Act 1974. Overview of EQA. It's a legal framework for environmental protection in Malaysia. Okay? It's an act relating to the prevention, abatement, control of pollution, and enhancement of the environment, and for purposes connected therewith. So that means that it's not just remember the three principles that we learned last week, the task that I gave you for your tutorial. So this is where the three principles come in, the three environmental principles, they come in. Okay, you can see there the keywords prevention. Prevention means the some action that could damage the environment, but we prevent it from happening. Prevention approach, remember, a preventative approach or preventive approach that we discussed last week. Abatement means to stop. The action may have occurred. Okay, the action that damages the environment may have occurred. So now we want to stop it, or we want to reduce that particular activity. Yes, abatement. Control of pollution. So some activities may produce matters that could damage the environment, so which is pollution. Environment, which remember the first slide that I showed you, I asked you to define the environment from the picture, remember? So we talk about how the environment can encompass not just the air, but also water, land, and so on, right? So control pollution in the elements of the environment, the sea, the river, land, and so on, air, and so on. Not just control of pollution, but also how do we control the environment? We can do that via EQA, Environmental Quality Act, okay? And also for purposes connected, meaning the penalties, the procedures, all contained inside the EQA. When we talk about licensing of prescribed premises, what kind of license are we talking about? What's the procedure? So all of these are contained inside the EQA 1974. So the environmental law in Malaysia is based on the command and control system. Okay, and somebody mentioned this during tutorial last week, command and control system, whereby license or permit should be applied for prescribed premises and EIA report should be approved for prescribed activities. So those are two main ways how EQA could protect the environment, whereby one is for prescribed premises, license and permit to be applied for and to be given. Two, for prescribed activities, perbuatan, activities that could pollute, that could damage the environment, EIA should be prepared first, should be approved first. Okay, and which department administers the provisions inside the EQA is the DOE, Department of Environment. In Malay, that is the Jabatan Alam Sekitar. So summary of EQA's environmental strategy, there are two approaches. One is curative, the other one is preventive. We haven't touched on the curative principle or curative approach. Okay? Preventive is you prevent something from occurring, right? You at the beginning or from the start, we try to avoid damaging the environment, avoiding pollution from happening, preventive. But at the same time, when an action, when a premise have damaged the environment, how can we cure? How can we remedy the situation? So that's the curative approach of EQA, remedial strategies. Damage has been done, okay? So you need to somehow make things right again, make the environment better again. So that is the remedial strategy. And for the environmental strategy under EQA, it is three-pronged, meaning ada tiga cara, three-pronged, three methods, short-term, medium-term, and also long-term. So in the short-term, okay, what can EQA do? It controls discharges and emissions, preventive strategy, and not curative. Immediately you control discharges and also emissions. So discharge and emissions, discharges and emissions can come in the form of liquid, can come in the form of gases. Okay, what else? Discharges, normally in the form of fluid lah, gas or liquid. Medium term, okay, incorporation of environmental component into development planning process. So this is when we talk about EIA, how EIA can be used to protect the environment. You plan from the beginning, from the onset of the proposed development. Okay, you incorporate the environmental component into development planning process, not wait until damage has been done. So even from the planning stage, you incorporate or you include the environmental protection strategies or mitigation measures to prevent damage to the environment. Long term, what about that one? The third strategy. Long term, ensure all development contain both physical environment and quality of life aspects in their planning. So not just prevent damage, but also enhance quality of life, enhance physical environment, so that in the long term, okay, not only can we avoid damaging the environment, but also we can enhance the environment as well. So we have three strategies in the short, medium, and also long term. Summary, if we can summarize EQA, we want to see the anatomy. So the one on your right, okay, the box in the blue box. That blue box is the anatomy of EQA. The objective of EQA is to prevent, abate, and control pollution, and also further enhance the quality of environment in the country in the long term. In the short term, we just want to control pollution, but in the long run, we want to control the environmental quality. And EQA, which is the primary legislation, okay, primary legislation means the main act lah. At the end or at the back of the main act, you have regulations and also you have orders. So in the context of our course, we are going to discuss the 1987 order, which is the EIA order. Now, the right-hand side, the contents of EQA 1974, it can be divided into 4, 5, 6, 7 parts. You see that part 6, but we have part 5A, yeah? So it means we have 7 parts, okay? First part preliminary, normally all the definitions are contained in part 1, okay, preliminary. Part 2, administration of the act, which tells you it's the DOE that's in charge, what are the powers of the officers of DOE and so on. Okay. Part 3 is on licenses, okay, licenses of the prescribed premises. Okay. Part 4, prohibition and control of pollution, again, okay, licensing of the polluting activities. Part 4, Part 5, control of scheduled waste. Okay. Part 5A, payment of cess and environmental fund, and also Part 6, miscellaneous. Okay. Now, if you go to the first part, part 1 of the EQA, we will find all the important definitions, and definitions for the EQA are contained in section 2. Section 2. Okay, as we all know, in all acts, normally the definition, the taksiran will come. Tafsiran ke taksiran will come at the beginning, section 2 or section 3. But in the case of National Land Code, section 5, yeah? Anyway, definition under section 2, the first one, definition of environment. Environment is physical factors of the surroundings of the human beings, including water, land, water, atmosphere, climate, sound, odor, taste. So physical is the first component of the definition of environment. The second component is biological factors of animals and plants. And the third component is social factors of aesthetics. I have touched on this last week, okay, when we talked about the definition of the environment. What about EMS, the Environmental Management System? It's a system comprising an organizational structure with its responsibilities. So meaning it's a system, yeah, which comprises an organizational structure, means there is an organization, there is a hierarchy, there is an agency in charge and players or actors operating below the agency. Okay, organizational structure with its responsibilities, practices, procedures, processes, and resources for implementing and maintaining the system relating to the management of the environment. So the the environmental management system is organized in such a way that there is a government agency in charge or oversees the management of the environment in such a way that all the parties know their roles. All their parties are given certain responsibilities in managing the environment in Malaysia lah. In the case EMS in Malaysia is Malaysian punya context lah. Okay, so implementing and maintaining the system. So not just implementing the provisions of the EQA, but also to maintain lah, to make sure to monitor that all the requirements for instance, if there is an EIA, ensure that the mitigation activities are being implemented in the development, for instance. Or if a license is given to a prescribed premise, the conditions in the license are being observed, and no breaches of conditions are being incurred by the party who applied for the license just now. Which in another word is the licensee. Pemegang lesen ialah licensee. The third definition is pollution. We always talk about pollution. Pollution. What does it really mean? We know that it is an act of emitting, of discharging something harmful to the environment, kan? But what exactly is the definition of pollution under the EQA? It says that any direct or indirect alteration of the physical, thermal, chemical, or biological properties of any parts of the environment. So we go back to the definition of the environment just now. The physical part, the thermal part, the physical part, the biological part. Aesthetics is not mentioned there, isn't it? But the important ones are physical, biological, and together with that, thermal and also chemical elements of the environment. By what way? In what way? By discharging, by emitting, by depositing. Discharge, emit, deposit are three different things. Yeah. Discharge when you is something that is related to liquid. Emit is something related to gases. Deposit something related to either liquid or something more tangible, something that you can touch. Yeah, depositing, such as hazardous waste, for instance. So by discharging, emitting, or depositing environmentally hazardous substances, pollutants, or waste, so as to affect any beneficial use adversely. Dia menyebabkan satu keadaan yang buruk. Dia dah mengakibatkan kesan yang buruk kepada environment. To cause a condition which is hazardous or potentially hazardous, bahaya to public health, safety, or welfare, or to animals, birds, wildlife, fish, or aquatic life, or to plants. Maknanya hazardous kepada not only human beings, but also other biological entities such as animals, birds, wildlife, fish, aquatic life, plants pun. So not just anthropocentric, but also ecocentric definition of pollution. Okay? The parameters of pollution tu diluaskan. It is being extended to the ecology rather than just the anthropology kita manusia lah. Anthropocentric and ecocentric as well. Also, pollution is to cause a contravention of any condition. Contravention maknanya dia melanggar keadaan, menjadikan keadaan sebaliknya. Contravention of any condition, limitation, or restriction to which a license under this act is subject. So again, any polluting activities are allowed under the act, but within a certain allowable standard, kan, allowable limit. But beyond that limit, that action is considered as a polluting activity, as a pollution. Below the standard, or below the amount, below the parameters, below the minimum, the stated amount is not considered pollution. But once you go above, beyond the amount that is stated, that is set in the condition of the license, then you are considered as a polluter. The activity is a polluting activity. So we go to the first part, which is licensing for prescribed premises. So again, prescribed premises di sini is bangunan berjadual. Bangunan we will see later on, bangunan is not just it's a physical space. It's not just building yang kita duduk atau kita occupy. It's a physical space. Okay. Now, part 3 of EQA regarding licenses, the Director General of Environmental Quality is the authority empowered to issue licenses. Okay, so the DG of Environmental Quality is at the DOE lah, Ministry of Alam Sekitar, kan, Ministry Kementerian Sumber Asli ke? Sumber Asli, so the DG of Environmental Quality, there is the authority empowered to issue licenses for prescribed premises, and that is stated under Section 10. So what is the license itself? So the license, as per Section 11 of EQA, it says that a license can be issued with conditions or without conditions. If it's with conditions, then the conditions must be obeyed or must be observed. If you go against the conditions, there are certain actions that can be taken, certain penalties that can be imposed on you. So can be issued with conditions or without conditions. And the name license the name license or the term license indicates that it is temporary, it's not permanent. So it states there, license can be revoked and conditions can be varied. So maknanya lesen tu boleh ditarik balik, can be revoked, boleh cancel. Conditions tu boleh diubah, varied, boleh diubah because it's not permanent. It's within the control of the authorities. Also, the license shall not contravene planning or land laws. So whatever happens, if there's any conflict with the TCPA, with the Town and Country Planning Act punya provisions yang mengatakan perlu kebenaran merancang, for instance, that requires planning permission, for instance, then planning permission must be obtained first. Or you go back to the zoning, to the local plan in the TCPA. It says the zoning is residential, for instance. If the license allows for industrial activities, then there is a contravention there, there is a contradiction there. So it's not allowed. Tak dibenarkan melanggar Planning Act. And also land laws. Land laws, you refer back to the title of the land. Okay? If the land title states certain express condition, for instance, can bangunan, kan, category of land use, bangunan, but can only be used for residential use only, kan. But the license under DOE, di sini license di bawah EQA ni mengatakan boleh digunakan untuk industri, then it contravenes the land law, it contravenes the details of the title, then that cannot be done. Maknanya that means that planning and land law is superior. It defeats the EQA. The licenses or the conditions in the license as issued under EQA must observe the TCPA, the planning law, and also must observe National Land Code through the titles. Okay? And the license is valid for 1 year and is renewable. So valid 1 year means temporary lah, 1 year. Renewable, but even though it's temporary, it can be renewed yearly. Can be transferred, boleh dipindah milik, boleh dijual lah, transferred, and must be registered, mestilah daftarkan, registered. Failure to obey license conditions is an offence. So it is an offence, satu kesalahan, if conditions of the license are being breached, sekiranya tak di-observe. Yang mana the penalty can be a fine and or imprisonment. Boleh juga di penjara. And a further fine for every day the offence is continued. So the penalty is clearly stated under section 16 of EQA. Okay, now what about part 4? So just now part 3 EQA, now is part 4 EQA, prohibition and control of pollution. Okay, now we are coming to the pencemaran punya part. Prohibition, dilarang, control, kawalan. Okay, a prescribed premise including vehicle or ship used to manage waste cannot be used or occupied without a license. So now this is the definition of prescribed premise just now. So it is a premise, satu tempat itu, it's not just a bangunan, it's not just a space, a building space, but also vehicle and also ship. Dikata di situ kenderaan dan juga kapal. So that means that premise includes buildings, vehicles, ships, used to manage waste. Kalau in terms for the vehicles, for the ships, these refer to the vehicles or ships used to manage waste saja, for waste management. Cannot be used, cannot be occupied without a license. So that is a license requirement under the EQA, under section 18. Mesti diperoleh, mesti apply for a license first, being then approved for the license, then only the premise, either the building or the ship or the vehicle can be used to carry waste, for instance, can be used to store waste, for instance. Yeah. So that is stated under section 18. The minister can control the emission, discharge, or deposit of pollutants by specifying the acceptable conditions. Again, the conditions can be set by the minister. This is according to section 21. Sections 22 to 29 are more specific on the types of pollution that the EQA aims to control. Yeah, so 22 to 29 contains prohibitions for specific types of pollution. So we can see later on, yeah. And see later on, section 22 says here pollution of the atmosphere. So from 22 until 29, it was a pollution of what? Pollution of what? Pollution of what? So beginning with section 22, okay, EQA, it is the prohibition, dilarang untuk mencemarkan atmosphere. Atmosphere lah, langit lah, sky, atmosphere. No person shall, dikata tidak ada seorang pun boleh, unless license, kecuali dilesenkan. No person shall, unless license, emit or discharge any environmentally hazardous substances, pollutants or waste into the atmosphere in contravention of the acceptable conditions specified under section 21. So who sets the acceptable conditions just now is the minister. Kan? Remember minister? So means you are allowed to emit, you are allowed to discharge, you are allowed to produce lah a certain level of substance, a certain level of pollutants, a certain level of waste into the environment. Selagi mana you are given a license, you are allowed under your license condition. But beyond the amount stated or stipulated in your license, you are considered a polluter. So it's very important to observe the amount permitted in the condition of the license. So section 23 is on noise pollution, prohibition of noise pollution. It says that no person shall unless licensed. So just look at the wording of sections 23 until 29. It says that tidak boleh melainkan dilesen. So if you are licensed, since the license contains conditions, it means that you are not polluting. But if you are not given the license, or if you go against the conditions in your license, then you can be considered as a polluter. Yeah, hopefully everybody understands. So no person shall, unless licensed, emit or cause or permit to be any noise greater in volume, intensity, or quality in contravention of the acceptable conditions under section 21. So inside the license, so that's set the decibel allowed in the premise, in the license premise just now. Section 24, soil pollution, tanah, pencemaran tanah. No person shall, unless licensed, pollute or cause or permit to be polluted any soil or surface of any land in contravention of the acceptable conditions. So ini prohibition untuk pencemaran tanah. Section 24. Section 25, pollution of inland waters. Inland waters means air di darat. Air di darat macam mana? Air di darat, ponds, kolam, tasik. So that is inland waters. Okay, inland waters as opposed to sea water. Kan? So river pun considered inland waters. Okay, so no person shall, unless licensed, emit, discharge, or deposit any environmentally hazardous substances, pollutants, or waste into any inland waters in contravention of the acceptable conditions. Again, tidak boleh kita mengeluarkan, tak boleh mengeluarkan, tak boleh membuang, tak boleh menanam, tak boleh deposit any environmentally hazardous substances, pollutants, or waste. Sebarang substance, sebarang pollutant, sebarang waste yang boleh menyebabkan kemusnahan environment, kemusnahan alam, hazardous, dia membahayakan alam. Section 27, yeah, okay, this is quite specific. It says there, prohibition of discharge of oil into Malaysian waters. Tak boleh melepaskan minyak di perairan Malaysia. Okay. No person shall, unless licensed, discharge or spill any oil or mixture containing oil into Malaysian waters in contravention of the acceptable conditions specified under section 21. So tak boleh menyebabkan pelepasan minyak ataupun sebarang campuran berminyak di perairan. You cannot do that because that will cause a lot of damage. You can see the photos there. Okay, oil pollution at beaches, di beach, di pantai, the cleanup of such pollution kan can be quite substantial, sangat mahal cost dia. Okay, so we can see juga some cases whereby the ships when they come to near our shore, okay, sometimes they accidentally terlepas minyak. Itu pun boleh dikira sebagai pollution. Ataupun sengaja buang, which is worse lah. Ada sengaja membuang oil in our waters. Okay, prohibition of discharge of waste, section 29, wastes into Malaysian waters. So just now oil, now we are talking about dumping waste into Malaysian waters. No person shall, unless licensed, discharge environmentally hazardous substances, pollutants or waste into Malaysian waters in contravention of the acceptable conditions, specified under section 21. So tidak boleh, dilarang untuk melepaskan, membuang sebarang buangan ke dalam perairan Malaysia. Okay, cannot do that. It's being stated or is being prohibited expressly under section 29. So all of these pollutions, all of these prohibitions against pollutions are stated under sections 22 until 29, which states that nobody is allowed to pollute unless licensed. Tapi tidak kira sebagai polluter. The person who is the licensee lah, the person who receives the license is not considered a polluter because he is allowed under EQA to release, to emit, to discharge a certain amount of pollutants, a certain amount of hazardous substance, sebab dikira okey lagi, tak berbahaya. Effect dia tidak is not that significant to the health up to a certain level. Okay. So 29A is quite special. Okay, this comes, you see the A, the small a after 29, so that means that this is an addition to the original section 29. It comes later, prohibition of open burning, because in Malaysia we experience the yearly haze condition kan, except for this year. This year everything was quite good because of COVID-19, so no open burning activities on our side or from neighboring countries. So that's why we did not experience any haze this year. But since I think the late 80s, in Malaysia, it is a yearly event, this haze that comes from our neighboring country. Okay, due to large scale land clearing, dia buka hutan ataupun dia replant their oil palm. But what do they do with the trees? They just do a open burning kan. So the effect of that, it is transboundary. The haze or the smoke comes over to Malaysia, to Singapore, to other countries as well. So not just from outside Malaysia, but also within Malaysia, because our farmers, and also not just farmers, but also the agri-industry, meaning the oil palm, nak buka hutan, nak buka plantation, what they do with the old trees or with the jungle, with the pokok-pokok hutan, what they do is they just do open burning, and that affects the environment quality in Malaysia. So due to that, section 29A was introduced to prohibit open burning. Prohibit. You see that it says that number 29A sub 8 sub 1, notwithstanding anything to the contrary contained in this act, no person, dikata apa-apa pun, walaupun apa yang dinyatakan dalam akta ni yang mungkin bertentangan, tidak ada seorang, no person shall allow or cause open burning on any premise. Tidak dibenarkan untuk melakukan sebarang pembakaran secara terbuka di mana-mana premise. Any person, sub 2, any person who contravenes subsection 1 shall be guilty of an offence and shall be, on conviction, be liable to a fine not exceeding 500,000 ringgit. So that is quite a large sum of penalty. The first time pun dia dah kata 500,000 ringgit. So sangat besar denda dia kan, 250,000. Because of the seriousness of the situation. At one time when they did open burning in one area, the underground fire can spread to other places, and it will be quite hard for the fire services department to control the underground fire, what they call pit fire, pit, tanah gambut kan. So that's why they prohibit open burning. So not just a fine, liable to a fine not exceeding 500,000 ringgit, but also to imprisonment. Ada kemungkinan boleh penjara, imprisonment for a term not exceeding 5 years. 5 tahun is quite lama kan, and also or dikata to both fine and imprisonment, kedua-duanya sekali. Okay, so you can see there the newspaper cutting quite a long time ago, but still relevant until now. DOE of 2 states revoke licenses for open burning. So license sudah diberikan, but the conditions of the license were breached ataupun dilanggar. Therefore, DOE, Department of Environment, menarik balik license tersebut. See there, the Kedah Perlis Department of Environment has revoked the licenses of farmers and estate owners. Estate refers to, in this case, can be rubber estate, can be oil palm estate. To conduct open burning for farming. Tak boleh, dia kata. So, were revoked a week ago when the haze started to hit Malaysia. So keadaan jerebu sangat serius sampai ditarik balik lah kebenaran untuk buat open burning. Okay, patrols to curb open burning. So maknanya pemantauan dilakukan. Patrols to curb open burning are also being stepped up. Maknanya pemantauan juga ditambah dan sebagainya to help with the quality of the air. Okay, so you can see here the year was 2000, long time ago, but still, like I said, it's quite relevant until now, except for this year. Because of the COVID-19 situation, no large-scale open burning was done due to all economic activities being stopped. Okay, we come to the second one. So just now was the licensing of prescribed premise. Now we come to the prescribed activities, the perbuatan pula. Perbuatan means the action, activities. Okay, environmental impact assessment, EIA. So you can see the photos there. You can see the photo ini proposed. You can see here the preliminary EIA, PEIA. So you'll see later on a few types of EIA, which is the conventional, the normal EIA, PEIA, preliminary, and also DEIA, detailed environmental impact assessment. So again, let me just stress here, EIA stands for environmental impact assessment. Okay, penilaian impak atau kesan, penilaian impak alam sekitar. Penilaian impak alam sekitar. Okay, for prescribed activities, untuk aktiviti terjadual. You can see there PEIA for this one, yeah. You see at the bottom, okay, the PEIA, the preliminary EIA untuk pembangunan bercampur for a mixed development on a lot, on 3 lots. One, so not 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lots. So this is quite a large scale development. So that not all development activities require EIA. Only prescribed activities require EIA. And some prescribed activities require normal EIA. Normal lah, I say EIA normal, biasa. Some prescribed activities require detailed EIA, DEIA. So it depends on the scale, on the quantum, on the scale of the development, on the proposed development. So ini semua proposed development, because this is preventive principle, preventive. Ataupun we can also say precautionary juga lah, precautionary principle and also preventive principle. Yes, but at the beginning, remember, preventive at the beginning of any activities kan, precautionary, you take precaution even when there is a risk. Betul lah, adalah elements of precautionary principle and also preventive principle in the EIA, in the implementation of EIA. So EIA is not just specific for Malaysia. EIA juga, the environmental impact assessment, is also being adopted in other countries as well, as a precautionary measure, as a preventive measure for any proposed development, so that they can identify, supaya kita boleh mengenal pasti sebarang kesan terhadap alam sekitar, so that we can, bukan kita stop, but we can minimize the risk, minimize the impact on the environment. Kita boleh propose langkah untuk mitigate, langkah untuk mengelakkan the damage from being done to the environment. Okay, so that is the why. That's the main reason why we conduct EIA lah, as a preventive measure or precautionary measure. Okay. So EIA in general, in Malaysia, I'm talking about Malaysian case, but it has been implemented outside Malaysia as well, yeah, especially in the US of A. USA to the first, the earliest country yang implement EIA, 60s lagi, 1960s. Anyway, EIA mandatory since 1st April 1988. Okay, predicts the likely environmental impacts of projects. So prediction saja, sebab project tu belum jalan. It's a new development, it's a new project. So what EIA does, it is EIA predicts, dia menjangkakan, dia projects what kind of, or it can, does it simulate? No, it doesn't simulate. It just projects, make some analysis of the project, and then they will try to come up with projections of any environmental impacts that can be caused by the proposed development to the environment or on the environment. Environment just now can be on the tanah, to the air, to the fauna flora, to the people as well, to the quality of life. So predicts the likely quality of life means ada bunyi, ada noise pollution tak? Because noise pollution can also affect human beings kan, things like that. Okay, so asap ke ataupun debu ke daripada the proposed development. Yeah, for instance, if it's a project, then you will have vehicles coming in and out of an area, will that affect the villages nearby? So that kind of impact on the environment. So it predicts the likely environmental impacts of projects for new projects and also for any existing projects that are expansion. Projects ni ada contoh an airport, an existing airport, you want to expand, nak besarkan airport kan, pembesaran airport kan. So that project may require EIA. Okay. EIA also finds ways to reduce unacceptable impacts. Dia mencari jalan untuk mengurangkan impact yang tidak dapat diterima, and to shape the project so as it suits the local environment in a sustainable manner. Sustainable development. Remember the three-legged stool. You do not want to prevent the economic development from happening in the area. For instance, dia memerlukan area satu kawasan tu perlukan airstrip, for instance. Airstrip tu kecil daripada airport kan. So airstrip, for instance, maybe for not just for tourism purposes, but maybe for economic purpose as well. You want to do some exporting of the local products, for instance, or for emergency services, for instance. So you need the airstrip. So development cannot be stopped, but you want to mitigate, you want to reduce the unacceptable impacts, and also you want to design the project in such a way that that you know the project sits well with the local population, with the local environment, with the local flora fauna, with the local setting, in a sustainable manner, supaya dia tak kacau the three-legged stool tadi. Also, what's good about EIA is when everything has been documented, the likely causes, how to mitigate the causes, then when you document, bila kita bukukan, when you write it down, you can present the likely causes and also how to mitigate the causes to decision makers. So means that the decision makers can make better decisions on the proposed development. Nak benarkan tidak? Nak benarkan, okay. Tetapi ada kesannya. So how do we mitigate? We look at the EIA. So we can impose these ways to mitigate as conditions of the development. So kalau development dibenarkan, then you must observe these conditions that we stated. And these conditions are based on the mitigation measures in the EIA, for instance. So everything has a purpose. So in this case, the EIA can help the decision makers to make better decisions, bukan nak stop, they don't want to stop, but also they have to stop the development, but at the same time they have to think about the long-term impact on the environment as well. So how to balance the stool, the legs of the stools again. You must try to reduce the risk on the environment. Okay? So what is the need? Why do we need EIA? It's a planning mechanism for preventing environmental problems due to an action. Kita nak prevent. Preventative principle or preventive principle. Okay? Planning mechanism. So planning means at the beginning. Okay? Prevent environmental problems due to an action. And EIA ensures that the potential problems are foreseen. Kita dah boleh jangka daripada awal. We are foreseen and address. Kita dah menangani dari awal. So not just jangka but also tangani the problem from the beginning. Foresee and address at an early stage in the project planning and design. So in all projects, planning and design is the earliest stage after land matters lah. Then we have the planning and design stage. So the usage of EIA for project proponents, for pihak yang nak menjalankan projek lah, project proponents yang menyokong projek tu, EIA apa guna dia? EIA can avoid costly mistakes as subsequent modifications required to make the project environmentally acceptable can lead to more time and money to be spent. So means if from the beginning you know there's a problem, and if from the beginning you address the problem, then later on you won't be caught by surprise. You won't be required to spend additional amounts because you know from the onset, you know from the beginning that there will be problems, and this is how you tackle the problem from the beginning. You don't go blindly into the project and later on only have to spend money to correct the problem. Then. And the second usage of EIA for project proponents is EIA can ensure a project that yields its benefit without causing serious environmental problem. And thus, so bila saja dia berjaya mengelakkan problems to the environment, then it's good for marketing, it's good for recognition, it's good for the track record of the proponent, of the firm just now, ataupun of any of the body that wants to undertake the project. Yeah? EIA can also promote sustainability. So lastly, it can promote sustainability. It can introduce balance to the three-legged stool. Dia boleh panjangkan lagi the stool of the legs of the stool. So you boleh panjangkan the leg of the economy. I mean, there's economic development in an area. But because you have taken the environmental consideration, the environmental factors into consideration, the environment punya stool, punya leg pun sudah dipanjangkan. You can also elongate the leg of the environment. So at the same time, if you plan it well, socially pun, you can promote as well the social aspect of the development. So it can promote sustainability as it promotes natural resource conservation. Okay? Conservation means you gunakan dengan cara yang berhemah lah, in a way that can generate that can bring synergy. Kita kata synergy to the people, to the environment, and to the economy as well. For officials, what is the use of EIA for officials? Kepada pegawai-pegawai, pada orang kerajaan lah. EIA can provide additional information towards a better decision making, as we said before. So the legal requirement for EIA is contained under Section 34A of EQA. Okay, dalam Environmental Quality Act, Section 34A, there is a requirement for EIA. So it states that the Minister of Natural Resources and Environment can prescribe any activity which may have significant environmental impact as prescribed activity. So sebarang aktiviti yang mungkin memberikan kesan signifikan kepada alam sekitar boleh di-declare, boleh dijadualkan sebagai prescribed activity terjadual. The project proponent of a prescribed activity must submit the EIA report to the director. So bila saja dah di-declare that particular activity is a prescribed activity, the project proponent yang nak menjalankan projek itu perlu menyerahkan, perlu submit the EIA report to the Director General of Environmental Quality before approval for the proposed activity is granted by the relevant approving authority. Again, we go back to our, have you learned approving authority? No, not yet, you haven't learned this. So for any developments, there are 4 types of approvals that must be obtained. Okay. The first one you have learned, which is the land matters, approval for land matters. If there's amalgamation of the land has been approved, for instance, a subdivision has been approved, for instance, and conversion has been approved, for instance. So land matters approval. The second type of approval is building plan approval. So building plan approval by the building department of the local authority. Just now, what do you call it? The planning. Sorry, just land matters. Land matters is under state, kan? But application is made at the land office. Then a building plan is at the building unit or building department of the local authority. Planning permission. Don't forget, planning permission is a third type of approval that you must obtain. Planning permission. The permission is given by the local planning authority. The fourth approval is the earthworks. Earthworks, maknanya nak mula kerja lah, start work lah. Earthworks, maknanya approval. And drainage, earthworks and drainage approval. So but for prescribed activities, you add one more, which is EIA. EIA is at the beginning, before the other 4 types of approvals are obtained. Okay. What about the legal requirements? Okay, continue with the legal requirements. The approving authorities for EIA include the National Development Planning Committee for federal government-sponsored projects, the State Planning Authority for state government-sponsored projects, Regional Development Authorities for state executive committees-sponsored projects, and MITI for industrial projects. So these are the approving authorities for each type of project. You go back to what type of project that is, and then you have to trace back the approving authorities for that particular project. Now, we talked about prescribed activities just now, right? So this slide will show you the 19 types of prescribed activities as per the Environmental Quality Prescribed Activities EIA Order 1987. So as I said before, EQA, EQA is the Environmental Quality Act. So at the back, we have several regulations and also orders. So relevant to our lecture this week is the Environmental Quality Prescribed Activities EIA Order 1987. The short form is EIA Order 1987. Anyway, so the activities that require EIA, that once you want to undertake these activities, you have to prepare EIA and then submit EIA. These 19 activities. Okay, so they require at least PEIA, the preliminary EIA. So as I said before, there are 3 types of EIA. Preliminary, the lightest one. I can see that lah. So if you rank from lightest to heaviest, okay, PEIA, the preliminary EIA, and then the EIA, the normal EIA. Then the third one, the heaviest one is the detailed EIA. Detailed means you have to go very detailed. The requirements are quite significant compared to the normal EIA and also the PEIA, the preliminary EIA. Now, we go one by one, yeah, the prescribed activities. The first one is agricultural activities. Certain types. These are just the types of activities. Then each type of activity will be defined according to quantum. Apa bentuk, apa dia punya jenis activities. Not all agricultural activities require PEIA, yeah. So, but what scale? Apa dari segi keluasan projek, tapak projek, for instance, ataupun aktiviti agriculture apa? Ada certain types, certain description, certain details that comes together with these activities. But I just want to show you, okay, these are the prescribed activities: agriculture, airport, drainage and irrigation, land reclamation, fisheries, forestry, housing, industry, infra, ports, mining, petroleum, power generation, quarries, railways, transportation, resort and recreational development, water treatment disposal, and then water supply. So as I said, not all of these activities require EIA, but there is a quantum, there is a minimum, for instance, minimum size of agriculture or minimum or certain type of agricultural activities that need EIA. Yeah, but you can see here all these 19 activities can have a significant impact on the environment. Therefore, sebab itulah dia diperlukan. For instance, we go to the most relevant to us, which is housing, katakan real estate. Or we always mention housing, yeah, housing. Housing, once you decide to build a housing development, a township, for instance, right? There will be land clearance. Land clearance, okay, we cut down trees, maybe we level hills, and we cut down hills dan sebagainya. Itu boleh affect, you know, water catchment, for instance. It can affect flora and fauna, for instance. Kan? Flora and fauna. It can also impact, you know, if we do reclamation just now, land reclamation number 4. How can it impact the environment? It can, for instance, if we do land reclamation at, you know, tepi pantai, tepi laut, for instance, kan, it can affect the aqua, the fish lah, senang cakap, the fish, or the, you know, the plants there kan, pokok bakau, for instance kan, the mangrove. Whereas the mangroves, mangrove punya trees, they have their own function, which is to serve as it can absorb waves, kan? Dia boleh absorb tu the hakisan. Sorry, it can absorb hakisan air, water punya erosion. It can prevent erosion, kan? At the, you know, near the sea. So that's why it's quite important to preserve the mangroves. But if you do reclamation, it can affect the mangrove punya area. So that's why you need to have to conduct EIA study and then propose how to reduce the effect on the mangrove area. For instance, if you intend to do land reclamation there. So as I said before, not all of this, but these are just the types of prescribed activities. Now we refine the types, okay? The 19 categories are defined, further refined. Kita kecilkan dia. Those are just the titles just now. So further defined according to project size, the area. So smaller housing schemes, no need lah. You don't have to do EIA. Smaller land reclamation projects, you don't need to do EIA, for instance. Smaller industrial punya projects, you don't have to do EIA, for instance. So you go back to the size. That's the first criteria to look. After the type of the activity, you look at the size. So project size. For instance, 3C just now, this one, drainage and irrigation, right? Irrigation says that covering an area of 5,000 hectares or more. So quite a large area lah. So the first one is you look at the area. Then you look at the capacity. You may look at certain activities, the area is not relevant. You cannot measure the activity based on the area. So you look at the quantum, the capacity. For instance, 12E, 12 just now, sorry. 12 just now, 12 is petroleum. Petroleum, you don't go by hectares, kan? So you go by quantum, by capacity. Construction of product depot for the storage of petrol, gas or diesel. So dia pergi spesifik lagi untuk apa? Dia untuk construction of product depot for storage of petrol, gas or diesel. And also last one is a certain project, so certain activities you cannot capture by size because the impact will be too significant. You cannot say too big or too small. So you just say that any certain development must require EIA. So this is the example to be airstrip development in state and national parks. So all airstrip development yang mana dijalankan di national park, di taman negara, di taman negeri, memerlukan EIA, because the national parks are protected jungle areas, protected areas. You want to protect the what we call the fauna, again the fauna and flora of the area. That's why we berjaga-jaga. We take the precautionary approach rather than the preventive approach just now. Precautionary, it's a risk. We want to avoid the risk at all. We don't want to risk it at all, kan? So that's why we need to conduct EIA at those kind of for those kind of prescribed activities. Okay, so these are the prescribed activities which require DEIA, the heaviest one, the detailed EIA. We have the iron and steel industry, pulp and paper mills. Ini semua heavy polluting industry, or what we call heavy industries. Iron and steel industry is a heavy industry. Pulp and paper mills can pollute river, source of water, kan? Pulp and paper mills. Cement plant, construction of coal-fired power plant, ini pun heavy industry. Construction of dams for water supply and hydroelectric power schemes, because of the scale of the prescribed activity. Dams, for instance, dia akan menenggelamkan. It will cause a large portion of land to be drown underwater, to be left underwater. That's why lah perlukan EIA. Sebab once the land is covered by water, then there's no way for you to recover back the land, kan? So that's why you need a very detailed study on it, which is a DEIA. Then land reclamation, incineration plant, whereby it involves scheduled waste and also solid waste, and construction of municipal solid waste landfill facility. Inilah you buang sampah tu dekat mana? Inilah municipal solid waste landfill facility. We call it landfill. Tempat pembuangan sampah, pelupusan sampah. We call it landfill, kan? Because landfill, in the long term, it will cause the rubbish to produce what we call lichet, cecair tu. The lichet tu can seep, dia boleh meresap, can seep into underground land, and it can go into the drinking water source. We don't want that, kan? In the long term, it can cause the land to be contaminated. Dah jadi contaminated land pula. Contaminated land will take hundreds of years to be remedied naturally. But if you want to remedy using chemicals, it will involve a large amount of money. So dia kena berjaga-jaga lah. So again, ada lagi the continuation of the list of prescribed activities which require DEIA. Project involving land clearing whereby 50% of the area or more having slopes exceeding 25 degrees. Nak potong bukit, nak potong kawasan tanah tinggi, you are reducing the water catchment area. That's why. And also, if you more having slopes, if slopes exceeding 25 degrees means you want to cut the hills, it may cause erosion later on. It can lead to all kinds of problems in the future. That's why you need detailed EIA, detailed study. Landslides. Logging, covering an area exceeding 500 hectares or more. Logging involves cutting down jungle, for instance, kan? Which is the source of oxygen. We know that, right? Development of tourist or recreational facilities on islands in surrounding waters which are gazetted as national marine parks, because the government wants to protect the national marine parks. Because once the corals, for instance, the corals in the national marine parks are destroyed, it will take 100 years or more to rebuild the corals again. Construction of recovery plants offsite for lead acid battery waste. Bateri sangat bahaya, kan? Tahu, you cannot simply dispose. You know this? Bateri tak boleh simply buang macam tu saja. Dia punya leak tu nanti contaminate the land. Schedule waste recovery or treatment facility generating significant amount of wastewater which is located upstream of public water supply intake. We want to protect our water supply. That's why any schedule waste recovery, ini treatment facility yang letak atas daripada, yang letak di tempat yang boleh mencemarkan our drinking water, and needs to be studied before we allow those kinds of developments. So who can conduct EIA study? We talked about EIA just now. So who are the professionals who are authorized to conduct EIA? Must be competent individuals. Competent means they have the skills required. If it's something that that can affect flora fauna, maybe biologists can. That's something that requires studies because of emission levels. Chemists, things like that. People like that with their own skills. Okay. So must be competent individuals, and these competent individuals are registered under DOE under the EIA consultant registration scheme. Okay, so it can be practitioners, it also can be academicians who have the expertise, who are maybe professors or lecturers in physics, or not physics, biology, in chemistry, for instance, so if they register themselves with DOE under the EIA consultant registration, they can undertake EIA. DOE will reject EIA from unregistered individuals, and the project proponent has to ensure that all the members of the EIA study team are registered, mestilah berdaftar. So this is what it looks like. This is what a DEIA looks like. For this one is the proposed petrochemical plant in the refinery and petrochemical integrated rapid project, the Pengerang Johor punya. So this is an example of DEIA done for a petrochemical plant di Pengerang Johor. So EIA is a study to identify what exactly are the steps in EIA. It identifies, it predicts, it evaluates, and it communicates information. So step by step. First of all is you identify the information on the, for instance, the adverse impact on the environment. And then you identify first, and then you predict further. Predict means you do some kind of projection, evaluate whether it can go ahead or not. Evaluate the potential benefits or not. Evaluate, you do some kind of cost benefit analysis evaluate. If the cost is more than the benefit, then of course it's a no-go. You don't go ahead with the project. But if the benefit in the CBA, in the cost benefit analysis, if the benefit outweighs the cost, then you go ahead with the project. And not only that, finally you communicate the information about the impacts on the environment of a proposed project, and to detail out, not only do this on the impact on the environment, but also to propose, or to detail out, to set out the mitigating measures. What can be done to minimize the damage to the environment, mitigating measures prior to project approval and implementation. And there are two elements to EIA, which is the impacts, and the second element is the mitigating measures, as I mentioned just now. Two procedures, the preliminary EIA and also the detailed EIA. So you have here PEIA and also DEIA. Okay, selection. Okay, you see the stages of EIA process, beginning with selection for EIA. Okay, whether the project falls under prescribed activities or not. Okay, during the project identification stage, the need for and type of EIA are determined together with alternative site and design. Okay, first of all, you decide, okay, we want to build a petrochemical refinery at this site. If is there another site available, okay, then you do the selection for EIA. So preliminary EIA, you look at the 19 prescribed activities. Okay, then the detailed EIA, if the prescribed activities have major or significant impacts on the environment, okay, or any prescribed activity that the Director General of Environment feels necessary to have DEIA, then you must do DEIA. But if it's only under the 19 prescribed activities, you just do the preliminary EIA, the lighter one. Then, okay, who reviews? PEIA is reviewed by technical committee. DEIA must, the difference between PEIA and DEIA. DEIA dah lah detail kan. DEIA needs not public participation, but needs to be displayed to the public before reviewed by the review panel. So there is another layer to the review process of DEIA, which is must be displayed to the public. So what then? Public can object, can make objection, but whether or not the objection from the public is considered, is up to the review panel. But whatever it is, the public must are given the right to review, to see the DEIA, and they have the right under DEIA. And mitigating measures and also the environmental management protection during the plan. EMP is environmental management plan. So mitigating measures, okay, means the steps that you can take to minimize the risk, and also the environmental management plan, meaning the detailing out of the mitigating measures. So maknanya mungkin dari segi timing, dari segi manpower during the project construction being implemented. Okay, then during project operation means upon completion of the project, there will be environmental monitoring and auditing must be done every year. Okay? For anything, for us, for instance, for firms, for for universities, we have our auditing every year. So the program, the degree program has been carried out, sudah berjalan. But every year you must do auditing. Same here, the project has been finished, has been finished in operation, but every year you need to do monitoring and auditing. So the minimum details of EIA report, what are required, paling minimum lah, at minimum, what are required to be included in EIA reports. The first one is a description of the proposed activity. Just describe it. The second one is meaning for the type of activity, the size, the land, the lot numbers of the land just now, mukim apa, a description of the potentially affected environment, including specific information necessary for identifying and assessing the environmental impacts of the proposed activity. So the impact on the people, for instance, ada dust caused by the vehicles coming in and out of the project site, for instance, or there will be a path. You need a path for the vehicles, for the trucks to go in and out of the construction site, which may trample upon. Dia mungkin langgar lah pokok-pokok yang ada kat situ, kat pokok kecil. So pokok tu mungkin ada some medicinal punya abilities medicinal punya tu. So mungkin perlu, ataupun mungkin ada nilai sendiri, nilai biologi sendiri So you need to declare that. A description of practical alternatives as appropriate. Sekiranya ada alternatif kepada impact on the environment just now, what can be done? Contoh lori masuk So besides lori tu, apa jalan lain yang boleh digunakan? Apa cara untuk membawa masuk bahan, instead of using trucks, for instance. Smaller 4x4, for instance, it can minimize the impact on the path. Contoh. An assessment of the likely or potential environmental impacts of the proposed activity and alternatives, including direct, indirect, cumulative, short-term and long-term impacts. So mesti ada satu assessment, penilaian tersebut, cost-benefit analysis, penilaiannya. Adakah the impact will remain in the long term, or is it just going to be for the short term only, for the construction period only? During operation, no more dust pollution, for instance, no more noise pollution, for instance, or will the effect be carried out until the operation? For instance, katanya kawasan itu akan mengalami pencemaran bunyi sebab sekarang sudah ada pertambahan vehicles into the resort, for instance. Contoh. Number 5, identification and description of measures or mitigation available to mitigate the adverse environmental impacts of the proposed activity, alternatives, and assessment of measures. So tadi the impact, now the mitigation punya factors or mitigation measures. Apa yang boleh digunakan untuk mengurangkan bunyi, for instance, yang mengurangkan habuk, for instance, you boleh use air kan, you can siram air, you can water the path, the earth path, the laterite path or the laterite road to reduce the dust from going up the air, going into the air. Indication of gaps in knowledge and uncertainties which may be encountered in data collection stage. Maybe during the finding out of the impact on the environment, there are certain things that are still uncertain. You tak tahu, maybe in the kampung tu the population size will increase or not, not certain. The impact gaps in knowledge, for instance, lagi the impact of climate change, for instance, in the area, uncertain yet whether the effect of climate change will keep on increasing, or if it increases, at what rate? Exponential rate ke ataupun rate yang gradual ke? We don't know yet. Okay. An indication of whether the environment of any other state or area beyond the national jurisdiction is likely to be affected by the proposed activity and alternatives. So if there's any potential impact of that development to another state, di kawasan yang lain, di negeri lain, must be stated as well. And finally, a brief non-technical summary of the information provided above. So in the above, okay, maybe the information given are more technical. Maybe you give the names of the species being threatened, for instance. Or in terms of noise pollution, you give in terms of decibel, berapa 80 decibels or 100 decibels, the measurement kan. But then at the end of the, also in the report, you must insert a summary in layman's language, non-technical summary. Example, so these are some examples of impact that can be found in EIA. Erosion, for instance, erosion, hakisan erosion, refers to any or all of the process that loosen and train. And train tu maknanya train kan, train tu tanah kan, so and train tu maknanya boleh loose, landslide lah, and train. And remove earth or rock materials from the place of origin. Erosion, dia boleh menghakis, dia boleh mengakibatkan pengurangan tanah, for instance. Sedimentation, sedimentation is sediment tu kotor lah, sungai jadi kotor. Sedimentation, what do you call that? Bila sungai ada sedimen, dia akan jadi keruh. Sedimentation, a process of deposition of any size of soil or earth materials on land, in rivers or in the sea. Sedimentation maknanya pemindahan soil, pemindahan tanah ataupun bahan tanah ke dalam air, ke tempat lain, ke sungai, ke laut. So means dia akan sebabkan sedimentation. Kalau it's a river, it can cause the river to become shallower. Sea pun sama, boleh mengakibatkan shallower part of the sea. Boleh impact on the fishermen, for instance, kan, if the sea becomes shallow, then it can affect their boats from being able to go out to the sea lah, daripada rumah dia kan. Siltation, the process of deposition of any size of soil or earth materials less than 0.76 mm diameter on land, in rivers or in the sea. Samalah, siltation, sedimentation. Okay? Dua-dua proses tu mengakibatkan pemindahan tanah, okay, ke tempat lain, ke river, ke laut. Impacts, apa impact erosion just now? Hakisan, on-site loss of value, loss of productivity, services from affected land, loss of topsoil, and resulting cost to communities. Topsoil is the bahagian tanah yang subur. If the topsoil is lost, then tanah tu tak menjadi subur dah, dia menjadi arid, dia menjadi gersang, kan? So what happens to the local community? Dia tak boleh lagi cucuk tanam, for instance. And what happens next? Kalau dah tak boleh cucuk tanah, dia terpaksa pindah ke tempat lain. And that means displacement. So it will affect the local people. Undermining of roads and utilities. Dia maknanya jalan tu mungkin tak boleh digunakan lagi. Roads and utilities such as it can affect apa contoh utilities. Roads, utilities, contoh longkang ke, that's a good drainage kan. Tadi saya dikambus dengan tanah kan. So can longer use, then what happens then? Flash floods kan, ni samalah number 5, clogged drains and increased nuisance flooding. Sediment and mud on roads with associated traffic problems and road safety issues. Tu boleh jadi juga, sedimen dah atas jalan, boleh mengakibatkan jalan tu jadi bahaya untuk digunakan. Sedimentation and bank damage to construction sites, high cost for reconstruction and maintenance, erosion. Erosion off-site, di luar kawasan tu apa jadi? Sedimentation in reservoirs and any other storage structures resulting in loss of water storage capacity. Sudah maknanya tanah tu lagi banyak pada air kan? Air, so means capacity to store water will be reduced. Instability of stream channels caused by increased runoff and sediments of loads. It can affect the river flow. The river flow, betul lah, the river flow. Dia boleh mengakibatkan anak sungai jadi terkambus, So if the smaller the streams, kita tak river, then ada streams kan. So if the river cannot run, what will it affect? What will be its effect to the river? It can lencongkan, it can affect the flow of the river kan. Sedimentation in rivers rivers juga in greater frequency of floods, tempat lain, pollution of rivers and streams, dah tak bersih air tu, okay? Decline or total loss of recreational and commercial fishing, dah tak menjadi habitat, not a good habitat for fish anymore, so you cannot do any fishing. Not the water is not clear now, it's dirty, you cannot do any swimming, you cannot do any water activities there. Reduce recreational and aesthetic value of riverbanks and waterways. Dah tak cantik lagi. Sudah berkarat, sudah jadi water, dah jadi apa nama tu, teh susu kan. It's not good, it's not nice. And what about other important EQA provisions? Prohibition of specified materials, equipment, plant in process, trade or industry. Prescription for reduction, recycling, recovery or regulation of specified hazardous substances. So inilah contoh-contoh EQA. No, other things inside the ACTA just now, besides the licensing of prescribed premises, besides the EIA requirement for prescribed activities, EQA also contains these other provisions. Dia kata tak boleh apa nama tu, tak boleh menggunakan certain materials, certain equipment, certain plants, certain processes, certain trades. In certain process, trade or industry, because it may be may have an impact on the environment. Maybe dari segi kesan itu. A good example is lead. Kan? Lead tu plumbum. Dulu lead tu was used quite widely used. Dulu lead was used in paints, for instance. Then people discovered that it can lead to health issues, can lead to cancer, and also very hard to be absorbed in the. Sorry, it can be absorbed by the soil, and then it can affect tumbuhan. The plants will be eaten by animals. Animals will also ingest, dia akan makan plumbum tersebut. So effect of plumbum lead tu will be long term. So that's why there is a prohibition of lead-based paint, for instance. Sekarang dah tak dibenarkan untuk digunakan. Asbestos, for instance, kan. So tak boleh digunakan lagi asbestos, lead, and so on. Okay, prohibition. Prescription for reduction, recycling, recovery, or regulation of specified hazardous substances. Certain types of hazardous materials cannot be simply dumped at landfills. For instance, clinical waste daripada from hospitals cannot simply be dumped in landfills. There are special waste, waste companies that come to the hospitals that use special vehicles to collect the clinical waste and then dispose of the waste in a manner prescribed by the authorities lah. Ada cara untuk buang the substances tu. So mungkin bahaya. Eco-labeling. Lagi eco-labeling tu means include in the products, okay, some kind of indication of the materials used, of the effect on the environment, for instance, if the product is used, and so on. Deposit and rebate schemes to ensure recycling or environmentally sound disposal of certain products. Dia nak promotekan recycling, ya. Environmental audits, appeal board, appeal, of course, any decisions by the Director General, by the DOE, for instance, may not satisfy some parties. So these disgruntled, these people who are not satisfied with the license conditions, for instance, not satisfied because their license are being revoked, for instance, they can appeal the decisions, kan? So where do they appeal? They appeal to the appeal board. Okay? And research cess. Research cess means satu kumpulan wang lah. Research cess on ways to finance research. Okay? And the establishment of environmental fund untuk buat research and R&D, research and development for better products. Yang boleh bantu environment, for instance, or better procedures that can enhance the environmental quality, for instance, and also miscellaneous provisions, including power to acquire info, power to seize and forfeit property, and so on. Okay, case study, two case studies. The first case study is the Bakun Dam case. Okay, the court case is Kajing Tubek and others versus Ekran Berhad 1996, and after that the Kajing Tubek case, okay, Kajing Tubek case, it found that the High Court found for Kajing Tubek, maknanya dia memihak kepada Kajing Tubek, and after that the pengarah DOE was not satisfied, Ekran Berhad also not satisfied, so they made an appeal to the Court of Appeal lawan Kajing Tubek and others too. Yeah. 1997, year after that. So this is where Bakun Dam is situated in Sarawak. It's near Belaga in Sarawak. Belaga, Sarawak. Major dam development. You can see there, Sarawak. Construction began 1996. Opening dah siap dah sekarang. Supposedly, the type of dam is a very large dam, embankment, concrete face, rockfield, Balui River, height near 205 meters. 673 feet. Okay, if a story is 10 feet, this would be 67, almost 70 feet, 70 stories, 70-story building. Okay, length, filled with all these. So it creates a Bakun reservoir. See there, capacity is so big, yeah, 43 billion meter padu, cubic meter. Now, this is the picture of Bakun Dam under construction. So this is the completed dam. You can see there, I said just now 70 stories, right? Okay, the facts of the case. So the initial survey, okay, the Bakun Dam was initially surveyed in the early 60s. So it was planned long time ago to build the Bakun Dam. And more studies in early 1980s. And it was first approved by the government in 1986. But it was shelved due to economic downturn at that time. So every 10 years or so, 9 to 10 years or so, our economy goes, there is a cycle, right? Apparently at that time, upon approval, there was an economic downturn, so that's why it was shelved. Maknanya tak jadilah. However, tak jadi tetapi shelved means KIV lah, KIV. But then again, it was revived in 1993, September, revived by the Malaysian government. And January 1994, the contract was awarded to Ekran Berhad. Ekran, one of the parties here of the case, Ekran Berhad. Okay. And then 1995, Ekran completes the EIA of the project because a dam is a prescribed activity that requires EIA. So March until May 1995, the EIA was approved. So means once they receive the approval, they start to clear the reservoir area. And then somehow June 1995, the International Rivers Network condemns EIA. The EIA was criticized. And June 1996, the first case, the Kajing Tobek case, the judge rules that Ikran failed to follow EIA regulations, the federal regulations, and not this. We're not talking about the Sarawak, we're talking about EQA. EQA and then the EIA regulations after the which is read together with the EQA. So July 1996, Ekran obtains interim appeal of ruling, and 1997, the Court of Appeal ruled in favor of Ekran Berhad. So what was the issue there? Issue in the case? Issue in the case was the Kajing Tubek and others are the orang yang tinggal di situ, orang, the natives who live in the area of the Bakun Dam, where the Bakun Dam was constructed. So these people sued the government and sued the Ekran Berhad because they want to see the EIA. They said, remember just now the EIA, there's a public, it must be displayed to the public according to EQA, Environmental Quality Act. Okay, so the first issue was whether Kajing Tubek and others, do they have locus standi? They have the right to sue. So this is the first hurdle in any court cases for natives especially because they need to prove that they have the right to sue. Then only the case will be brought, will be heard further in the court. So kalau locus standi punya hurdle is not passed, then the case stop there. It will not be heard in the court. Yeah. And then another issue is was the dam and the responding EIA, was it under the power, the purview of the state, or is it the power of the federal government? Because it involves the environment. Okay? Environment under state ke under federal? So if it's under, if environment matters is under state, then the EQA is not relevant in this case. If the environment is decided to be under federal, then you must you must apply the EQA provisions. Okay. Then the third issue was the burden of proof is on the applicants to prove causation of damage. So the burden of proof yang mengatakan, oh nanti the dam will cause environmental damage, that must be proven by Kajing Tubek and others, not by Ekran, not by the DOE, not by the Ekran, the syarikat to the company. So on point of number 2, we want to focus on this. Point number 2, environment is under whose purview? Is it under the state government or is it under the federal government? Because it makes all the difference. If it's under state government, then they will follow the state environmental law. If the environment is decided to be under federal government, then the EQA will be adopted. Then adalah requirement for public display of the EIA. Anyway, so on point number 2, the Court of Appeal held that environment is a multidimensional subject. Dia kata dia sangat kompleks, multidimensional. Dia banyak aspek kepada environment, which could be related to various subjects in the federal, state and concurrent legislative list. Dia kata dia sangat kompleks. Dia tak ada satu yang terletak under state ke, under federal ke, under concurrent ke. Dia ada sikit-sikit in all the list. Ada sikit di sini, sikit under federal, sedikit element of environment under state, land lah. Ada sedikit environment under concurrent, landing lah, for instance. Then COA held that federal law would govern environmental issues arising of subjects in the federal list, federal law, while the state law would deal with those aspects of environment that could be related to land, water and forest. So land, water, forest are under the state list. So anything other than that boleh diletakkan di bawah federal list. Okay, and then the court was asked to decide which environmental law was applicable to the Bakun Dam project. Was it the Environmental Quality Order 1987, the Prescriptivities under EQA 1974, This is the federal law, federal environmental law, or is this law applicable, the Natural Resources and Environmental Prescriptivities Order 1994, which is a Sarawak law, the state law, under the Natural Resources Ordinance 1949. Okay, now the difference between these two laws, the federal environmental law and the state environmental law, under EQA, the Director General of Environment was empowered by Section 34A to issue guidelines, and the EIA guidelines provided that the EIA report of a certain project should be made available to the public upon request. The environment just now, to be displayed to the public. The Sarawak law, the Natural Resources and Environmental Order 1994, did not contain such provisions yang mengatakan EIA must be displayed, must be made available to the public. Now, the respondents' argument, dikata di situ, the environmental issues arising out of the project should be governed by EQA, and Kajing Tubik punya argument. And the project was a prescribed activity that falls under the requirements of Section 34A. Therefore, it is under EQA. Appellant's argument, the Ekran Berhad and also DOE, dia punya argument, the project concerned a particular land, a particular river that were wholly within Sarawak. And since land and river were state subjects, the state law should govern environmental issues arising out of the project. Good argument as well, right? Furthermore, the appellants argued that the environmental impact is neither in the federal list nor the concurrent list. And that under Article 77 of the Federal Constitution, the state of Sarawak is lawfully entitled to legislate over such matters. Sebab environment tidak dinyatakan secara terang whether it's under federal or it's under state concurrent list. Must be under state list. That's their argument. And the Court of Appeal agreed on this point. Dia bersetuju. So bersetuju maknanya there's no requirement for public display of the EIA. Tak perlu tunjukkan EIA itu kepada Kajing Tubik and others. Okay. So another case study is the DOE license. So this is not EIA lah. So the DOE license, bauxite mining in Kuantan. What is bauxite? It's a rock material that contains aluminium ore used to manufacture food packaging and phone casing. So that's why it's very valuable lah, bauxite. So where is it located? In Peninsular Malaysia, activities related, which law governs bauxite, activities related to rock material governed under National Land Code 1965. The chronology, so this one was the chronology a few years back, yeah? So it says there, started from 2014. Actually, Indonesia was the main exporter of bauxite to China. But then again, there was a ban of export of bauxite to promote its own aluminium industry. So dia tak export keluar. Dia gunakan their own bauxite to promote their aluminium industry. Therefore, there was a demand for Malaysia's bauxite, and there were started the mining activities for bauxite in Kuantan, and 34 mining licenses were issued by the PTG, the Department of Lands and Mines, PTG. 2014, various environmental problems began to show. Dia dah start dah. Dust pollution. What else? Air pollution. What else? People got sick. People got respiratory problems. People got skin diseases, skin problems. Kids begin to cough and things like that. Various environmental problems began to show. Soil erosion as well. January 2016, the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment imposed a 3-month moratorium. Moratorium means a suspension on bauxite mining activities. Illegal mining activities still took place during the moratorium, and the environmental degradation worsened. Dia punya sebab pelanggaran what do you call it, moratorium just now. People still did some illegal mining of the bauxite, masih ada degradation. So July 2016, all the 34 licenses were revoked. As we said before, licenses under the control of the DG and it's temporary. The licenses can be revoked. The conditions can be varied. Boleh ditukarkan, boleh dipindah. And 2017, the Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment extends the moratorium. So dipanjangkan tempoh suspension tersebut because of the serious problem brought upon to the environment by the bauxite mines. So different from other bauxite mines in the world, the bauxite mines are close to human settlements in Kuantan. Itu beza dia sebab dekat dengan penempatan manusia. That's why it was such a big issue. Okay. The bauxite mining activities in Kuantan include mining, transporting, stockpiling. So bukan saja apa nama tu? Bukan saja the digging up, the mining, bukan saja apa nama tu? Mining lah, mining lah. Transport dia, the bauxite tanah tu perlu dibawa ke tempat lain untuk disimpan, stockpiling in huge quantities. And the problems include, the environmental problems include air pollution, visual pollution, water pollution, noise pollution. So all these are the pollutions. So you can see there some photos of what happened at that time, even at schools, the dust. Like we said, the dust, the pollution, they know doesn't respect any boundary. It will just go according to where the wind is blowing lah. The dust particles just now. So the issues, the nature of the bauxite mining that involves mining, transport, and stockpiling means more than one government agency and more than one law are involved. And the mining license the 34 mining licenses were issued by PTG. Transport, because it needs to be transport to the storage facilities, SPAT, Suruhanjaya Pengangkutan Awam, kan? So the transport department, and then the environment, DOE, the pollution just now, control of pollution is under the Department of Environment. Illegal mining was caused by weaknesses in monitoring and also enforcement. So this was why it was so complex, because some environmental issues are not just does not just concern DOE, but also it involves other departments who gave the permission for the activity to be undertaken. So in this case, the mining license was issued by the mining licenses were issued by the PTG, and nothing to do with the DOE. But the environmental control is under the Department of Environment. You can see there the various conflicts. Kita panggil konflik ataupun various kita also can call this power play. Dia power play to means each department has their own objective, has their own own KPIs, for instance, kan, different, which may contradict other departments punya objectives and also KPIs. So in this case, mining license boleh diberi, tak ada sebab untuk tak diberi, but at the same time it causes problems to another department, which is the DOE, because ada environmental pollution. Okay, so that's all, and these are some other cases related to the environment in Malaysia, and also these are some of the the questions that I want you to answer for your tutorial. Okay, so what I want you to do is you pause the video, answer these questions. Okay, the first one, what are the environmental law principles that can be found in the EQA? If you go back to my lecture just now, you will find the answers there. What are some issues in implementing EQA in Malaysia? If you play back the video, you can find some answers there. How does the EQA promote sustainable development? Also inside my lecture just now. How does the EQA affect the real estate industry? Think on this one. I want you to come up with your own ideas, because these I have somewhat give some hints just now, but there are other areas that the EQA can affect the real estate industry. Do some kemahiran berfikir aras tinggi lah. Okay. So that's all. These are some of the references that I used. And then after that, okay, I have also included the detailed process of the PEIA and DIA and DEIA for you to have a look later on. Okay, I shall not go and discuss this because this is too detailed. Yeah, and this is the project cycle and integration, as we said just now, even at design, mana design, prescriptivities, design. Ada somehow project concept here. Sorry, project concept. feasibility. So you can hear management plan. So any project, any development is a cycle of activities. So you can see how the environmental management punya strategies can be inserted at any stage of the development untuk memastikan to protect the environment and also to enhance the quality of the environment. So that's all for this week. Okay, don't forget to answer the questions. Okay, that's all from me. So happy learning. Please